Hey now, welcome to the dirty side of the track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today, just a couple minutes ago, was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and it was a banger. Oh, I'm so excited to be talking about this. Welcome, Rob. How are you, man? And happy birthday, by the way.
No, thank you very much. And what a race to get for my birthday, eh? We'll get there when we pick the bones out of it, but we were a little worried at one point that we were going into a bit of a one-stop luller, and then we got absolutely proved completely 100%ly wrong.
I was
Um,
actually in the notes. I was trying to figure out a U. I was gonna go like Lando, U, Leclerc, and I was gonna create a lull acronym because it was getting. And I know I need an, but anyway, it was getting so. I was worried, like you, tire management central, and then it just came alive.
oh, it did it. It did it. So yeah, I mean, we're recording like literally about 30 minutes since the podium because I've got to go and get on an airplane. So, but it is awesome to be talking about it so quickly again. The only problem is we don't find out, by the time we publish this, if we then go and find out that Oscar got disqualified, we're going to look stupid. But
There actually were some VSC infringements. We won't find out about any of those, or what happens if Carlos or Checo. I would assume Carlos would get a penalty, but we'll see.
yeah, okay. Interested to talk about that one when we get there because you say Carlos. Okay, right.
Uh huh.
Um, let's let's dive into news and social. So we'll have a look and see what's been happening across the week. You've got some entries in the video vault, so we can open that one up, and then we'll take a look at the race weekend, and then we will look ahead to Singapore, and then that, as they say, will be that. Shock horror. We haven't got any shock horror music, have we? We haven't. We
Not
haven't got.
really. I
We
mean,
have
we
to find some
don't.
shock.
We
Um,
don't.
Nui got unveiled as Aston Martin employee.
The closest music we have for that surprise would be something like Adrian Newey signs with Aston Martin, which we all knew for a very long time.
Yeah, so it just all confirmed all the things that we said last week. So probably not too much to add on that one, but it's official now, unless you've got some little statoids you want to throw in.
Yeah, just a couple notes, right? So obviously joining with Lance and Fernando, and Newey doing what you have to do when you join a team, said about Fernando. We've battled against each other for many years. He's been an arch enemy at times. We came so close to getting him to join Red Bull in 2009, which was a great shame it didn't happen. He's a legend of the sport, and I look forward to working with him, which is obviously a nice thing to say and accurate. So it will be fascinating to see the 56-year-old Fernando Alonso driving that car next year, and then the year after. So I joke, but the thing that is serious is what he's getting paid. And we already knew this was £30 million a year, which is a lot of money. The thing I did not know, the Daily Mail reports he's also getting an equity stake in the team, a
Ooh.
2.5% equity stake in the team. And if you think about it, and now the one thing that does bother me about F1, driver salaries are rather opaque. Like you never really know. Like you hear rumors and stories. It's not like the NBA or the NFL where it's publicized and sent out and you know. So if you use, I used the race and then a website called Crash and a couple other places. Max and Lewis and potentially Charles will be the only people making more money than Newey. All the rest of the drivers, the people out in the car, will be making less than Newey, which
Oh
is
my
kind
gosh.
of wild, including Fernando.
Oh my. Now that is insane.
That was all I just wanted to say. I was surprised when I started thinking about the fact that two, maybe three drivers will make more money than Newey. Otherwise, he's higher paid than every other driver on the grid.
Oh my word. Oh, and talking about money, the cost cap raised its head this week, but I don't think it's anything. It's probably a nothing burger again. But engine manufacturers Honda and Alpine have both committed a procedural breach
Yeah.
of the F1 cost cap regulations. The FIA said that they both acted in good faith at all times. They were cooperating. They're proposing that both teams enter into a so-called accepted breach agreement, which is what? Admitting that you're wrong and going and standing in the corner and hanging your head in shame?
Yeah, I think this is like you filed your paperwork on the wrong email account or 5 minutes too late or something. I don't think this was I think this is what we would call a nothing burger.
Yeah,
Um,
although it might be an expensive nothing burger
yeah,
because Aston Martin apparently also committed a procedural breach in 2022. And I don't know if there's, different types of procedural breach. They used the wrong color highlighter. I'm not quite sure what, but they got fined $450,000 for that one, Aston Martin. So It's not nothing, but maybe this one will be nothing. Who knows?
Because of this, I did like finding out that the engine manufacturer cost cap is $140.4 million. Dang, that's a lot of money. I'm just saying that you're spending that much money to make an engine, and Renault's over there with just a turd of an engine for $140
I was going to
million
say
dollars.
somebody coming in looking at the right. So we've spent 140 million on this engine. Hang on a minute. What about old Pierre over there? Why is he draped in gold jewelry? Has everyone checked the receipts?
We spent 20 million on the engine and 120 million on catering. The escargot, c'est fantastique.
And keeping the money theme going, but this one's ridiculous. I mean, I know why the F1 game can't react too much, I guess. They don't want to allow people to screw the system. But Behrman comes into the fantasy game for a week to cover for K-Mag. He came in at 15 million.
$15 million dollars for a Haas. 15, a rookie in a Haas. Now, we know he did well today. We know he acquitted himself well in the race. $15 million.
When you compare to Colapinto, who was like came into the game at 4.8
yeah,
in a Williams,
5.3
it's
now
like,
or something.
Yeah. But
15 million. Now I know K-Mag was a little overpriced anyway. He was at like 12 million, which was a lot. I had to like look back because Nico was 9 point something.
yeah.
And then because we're recording this so quickly, let's shift off the money in fantasy and just talk really fast about fantasy because it was a wild week. I'll do this real fast. And again, for everyone in the league, we will of course talk about the finishing positions next week. So if you did well, hang on, you'll get your day in the sun next week's pod, I promise. But I thought I was being a real tricky guy over here because of that penalty they applied for keeping Logan around. Based on the idea of Sam Collins, retweeted by Fantasy HQ, Adam, I kept him. I kept Logan in, and I used my no negative chip because that would take away that penalty, and I was able to put in a couple of top drivers with a couple of top constructors because I haven't built quite as much a budget as some people. So I was really excited, but I had Lando 2X on both my teams. And after that disaster in quali, which we'll get to, everyone's talking about doing a final fix. Do your final fix. I go to apply it. I can't because you're not allowed to use two chips at the same time. And
Yep.
I was so angry at myself for getting myself in that position. But then Lando did fine and finished fourth or fifth, whatever it was. Craziness. This is a wild weekend. Anyway, sorry. More fantasy next week, I promise. But that's all. I just wanted to share that, how I put myself into a corner there with not realizing you couldn't use two chips at a time.
Oh, what a rookie mistake.
Totally.
Okay, and you've got a random stat now that you just threw in here before we open the video vault.
Yes. So we actually saw some nice pit stops from the Sauber team today. We saw Valtteri go in and out at like 2.6 or 2.5, something around there. But I found entering this weekend, the average pit stop times, and I thought it was fascinating. So first off, you would assume it would be Red Bull, at least I would have, at the top, because they always seem to have those really fast stops, and they're known for the way they practice. It's actually Ferrari. 2.59, the fastest average pit stop entering the Baku race this weekend. Ferrari, 2.59 seconds, followed very, very closely by Red Bull, 2.62. And then a slight delta to McLaren, 277, Mercedes, 283, and on and on. And you do find, curiously, that RB, Williams, and Haas and Alpine are down towards the bottom. So I say curiously because they're the lower performing teams. You would think that you would get your pit stop so tightened up that you could save a little bit of time on track. You would think it should be the reverse. Like the worst team should have the best pit stops because that's where you can make up the time easier. I do also say this, and I'm sorry, Paul. I have to bring this out. We remember the beginning of the season and the wheel nut problems at Sauber. 6.27 seconds average pit stop. It's almost twice as much as the ninth one, RB 3.51. Again, 50 some odd second pit stops do not help the average.
No,
and they had a lot of those. Anyway, I thought that
they should be allowed to remove the outliers, Sauber, though.
Exactly. Anyway, just it was nice to see Ferrari doing something right again after their Monza strategy win, pit stop win as well.
Exactly. But, so, do you want to open up the video vault and see what gems you found for us this week?
I do. There were a few. right. So let's start with switching the pedals. Azerbaijan Grand Prix preview on the Ferrari channel, 2.5 minutes. Again, I'm begging Ferrari. Make these videos longer. Go back to the C-squared challenges we know and love. 2.5 minutes. What they did was they switched both the pedals and the paddles for Charles to drive Baku. So the downshift was the upshift and vice versa, and the gas was the brake. And Carlos is watching this, and he was stunned. Charles nailed it. I mean, he didn't put one foot wrong, literally. With the pedals backwards and the paddles backwards, he aced it. I don't think I could have gotten off the grid on a video game if it were all backwards. And he was putting in fastest laps. And Carlos is literally watching this like, did you practice? It was wild. But it was fun to watch. And again, Charles is clearly a Baku expert. Something that I think we underlined today. Second video, The Power of the People, presented by Business Solver. It's on the Alpine channel. It's 4 minutes. There were like 306 views of this thing when I got there, and there were about 307 views of it after I left because no one else has watched it. It has race team manager Rob Cherry, and I enjoyed it. He just kind of talks through a bit of his career, but also what a race weekend looks like for the race team manager. They've had these on other channels. Haas has done them specifically in the past, and a few other teams. I like these. I kind of like that behind-the-scenes thing, so if you're interested, check that out on the Alpine channel. And then finally, Lando Norris tests the crazy Lego McLaren car at Silverstone F1 Motorsport. It's on the CGTN Sports Scene channel. Again,
Of course it is.
Business Solver, CGTN. I'm everywhere, baby. It's 3 minutes. Someone made a car out of Legos and had Lando drive it around Silverstone. There are 340,000 Lego bricks. And as I looked at that as a father, and as someone who's purchased Legos, I have to think that's more money than the actual McLaren. You could have bought an actual McLaren for that amount of Lego bricks. No?
I just want to know how many bricks they stood on while they were making the thing and had to have a timeout while everybody was jumping around, holding onto their foot. It's the most painful thing in the world.
How many feet were ruined in the creation of this car? Man. Anyway, that was a neat video. But with that, we're closing her up.
Locked up for another week. Right, okay. Race weekend. You're going to make practice real brief because just with work and the scheduling of these ones, it was super early, or it was in the middle, or the later ones were in the middle of my working day. So I basically saw nothing other than the highlights on the F1 TV channel.
That's all I saw too.
Okay, so
I basically last week, and I'm traveling again next week, and I had
my summary. That's okay. I had my summary of red flags. And then 2 questions. Red Bull are back? McLaren are struggling? Because it kind of started looking like we were seeing Perez and Max back up near the top of the leaderboard on pace. McLaren weren't exactly lighting it up. So I was like, okay, interesting. And then we came around to qualy, and some of those things got blown out the water. Other things kind of crept in. The biggest one has to be in Q1. The tail of the phantom yellow.
Right.
The yellow flag. Was it a yellow flag? Was it a white flag? Was there a light on a panel? Was
it a green flag?
Was the sun glinting off a building nearby and gave a yellow glare to Norris? All we know is that on his final run, Norris had to lift off believing he'd seen a yellow flag, which the onboard did show it. They had like all the Sky race pads, slow-mo, rewind, zoom in. Yellow panel on Norris's steering wheel, and then they circled something like way, way in the distance. And I'm not sure there's any way that an F1 driver, even with air eyesight, could have seen that, which they're saying is a yellow flag waving. So he aborts the lap and finds himself out in Q1. That was the biggest shock of Q1, because everyone else that went out was probably expected, right?
Yeah, and agreed. So we lost Ocon, Joe, Valtteri, and Danny Rick, but also Lando, as you say. So there was a yellow called. I think I saw late yesterday some actual recap of the yellow flag button was pushed briefly and then unpushed, and so I think Lando did what he had to do. I could be wrong. I didn't see it in any of the onboards.
You unpush a button?
Yeah.
Push it.
Actually,
you push it again and it clicks back out.
If I might, I have an idea to make the world a better place. I'd like to be able to unpush buttons on an elevator. So that, have you ever hit the wrong button and then you have to stop at a floor?
Yeah.
It'd be nice if you pushed the button a second time and then it stopped the call. I'm just saying, I've created a way to make everyone's life better by a small invention.
I'm not sure you
Yes.
have there because you know what people do just out of habit. They come in, they get on, and then they press the button for the lobby or they press the button for their floor. And if someone in the lift has already pressed that, it's going to undo it, and then you're
Yeah.
not going to get. No, it
Oh,
could be a disaster.
yeah, but people just need to learn how to be smarter. Come on, Rob. Just because I fix the world, don't take it apart. Anyway, so then we go to Q2. We lose Stroll, Hulkenberg, Tsunoda, and Behrman.
And
And
Gasly at the time,
yes,
yeah.
talk about the Gasly part because it's interesting.
Well, the Gasly part, he gets disqualified then eventually. So he manages to get through into Q2, almost makes it through into Q3. I think he was one of the fastest. Maybe Behrman had beaten him, but anyway, it looked okay. And then they found out they got some irregularity in their fuel flow, which Alpine then tried to make out that it was detrimental because the problem they were suffering from, that fuel flow would have made the car slower, allegedly. But it's like, well, rules are rules. It doesn't really matter what the fuel flow is doing. If it ain't inside the regs, it's a disqualification. I don't care what impact it had on your car.
So the team representative explained that they had an unexpected short duration technical fault that raised the fuel mass flow greater than expected in a transient fashion. The cause was agreed by the FIA technical staff, and I didn't understand a word of that.
I think they just unpushed the wrong button.
So he unpushed the gas button a little too hard.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Then we go to Q3. In Q3, we saw kind of what we expected to see. We saw some McLarens at the front end. We saw some Ferraris at the front end. We did not see a lot of Red Bulls near the top, but we did see Checo performing well. We'll get to that in a second. But we saw Charles. We saw Charles taking his 4th podium in a row at Baku, and he's not going to convert it to a win again, but we'll get into that in a second in the race. But yeah.
Yeah, you're right. The upper the like it was really interesting, quali Q3 because it had lots of different stories running through it. So like Leclerc getting pole, Piastri getting the McLaren in there, but then Perez out qualifying Max, which just
Wow.
I thought the sun was going to go out. Like it was.
Well, I mean, Checo's is the only 2-time winner at Baku, and he fancies himself a Baku expert. Checo over Max. Colapinto.
Colapinto. Oh my gosh, he kind of had snuck through. I hadn't really been paying any attention, and so I'm looking at Q3 and going, hats off to the Williams boys, both of them in there, and Colapinto absolutely nailing it. And Albon might have nailed it if he hadn't had a small little issue.
The airbox fans still in. I've never seen something like that. I loved it. I loved Alex trying to fish around to get it out by himself so that he can continue on with his lap. I love the idea that he then just tosses it on the side of the road. He's like, I'm out of here. Like that, what? And all the dry ice is sitting there on the back of the car. I'm like, this is the craziest thing I think I've ever seen. It's big and yellow. How do you miss it?
I know. Did you not see the shot from inside the Williams garage as he leaves?
No. The mechanic trying to get it.
He nearly drags the mechanic. He's desperately trying to pull this fan off. It's obviously locked in too hard, and he nearly gets dragged out of the garage with him. And the funniest thing is the marshal, who's not quite sure if he should come out and touch the car or not. Like, he's like, can I come and take the airbox off it? Like, that'll be interfering. You'll get Albon cleared out. But at the moment he throws it over the side, then it becomes debris on the side of the track, and you can carry on going. And anyway, it was all completely pointless because Albon didn't get around in time to even put a fast lap in. So,
but you nailed it, right? Williams, 2 cars in Q3, tremendous. And Colapinto out qualifying Alex. We had Checo out qualifying Max. And obviously, Lando, papaya rules, nowhere to be found at qualifying. So I thought it was a really fascinating quali. Maybe, it was good, fascinating, but it just set up a great race, what ended up happening. So I was so excited for the race to start at 6 a.m. my time today on a Sunday.
I appreciate you getting up to watch that live because it's the only way we had a chance to record today. So I do appreciate that. So it was early. We were both confused. You replied to a tweet, which was like, where's Hamilton? Why is he in the pit lane? We'd both completely missed that news that he'd swapped his power unit and then made some tweaks to the car. So he was starting from the pit lane with Ocon. Pretty much the vast majority of the grid went with mediums, apart from Norris and Albon at least, right?
Right.
A couple of others went on hards. And things looked okay for Charles at the beginning. Got away well. Piastri got away well as well. Sainz got done by Perez. Great start from Perez up the inside.
And Max too. Like the 2 Red Bulls both took off pretty well, like rocket ships. And Max was all over George.
Yep.
And so you watch this happen, and again, a pretty clean first lap until Lance Stroll is like, you know what? I think I can go down the inside on everybody. And so he starts going down the inside on turn 4, and he I don't know what exactly he was attempting to do. Like, did he think the Yuki would just pull over and stop for him? And so
I think he thought Yuki might get out, put a little red carpet down, welcome him through. Um,
and so
let's just
Yuki,
put it this way: Yuki was not expecting him to leave his nose in there and just did what
no,
any racing driver does, which is like turn to go around a corner,
right.
because that's what you have to do.
I don't know what Lance was doing. And Yuki, obviously, we didn't even see the damage at first. We knew he had some. Lance got a puncture. Yuki ended up with a giant hole in his side pod. And so when he retired a little while later, and you saw him just dropping back, and then eventually they showed the side pod, I'm like, that's not going to work.
No, it's really not. And Norris had a fantastic start for once. We've been giving him grief for his awful starts. I've been trying to defend him a little bit with the smattering of bad luck, but a lot of them have been on him. But here, he went straight up 2 spots, which means net gain from quali. She went up 4 because once Lewis and Ocon had to start from the pit lane, he immediately jumped up 2 spots. So kind of got 4 spots on the first lap in a way.
Yeah.
And so he was flying along.
I believe those are his first positions gained on the first lap this season. I may have that wrong,
Yes,
but I'm fairly
I think
certain that's right.
I think where did we see this? Was it Lee put it in the Discord of Norris had been the only driver all year to not make a single spot up on the opening lap.
I think that's right. Yeah, Lee did that.
Yeah. Oof. And then we kind of had all the way up to about lap 11. I was starting to get a little worried because by the lap 7-ish, no one was in DRS on the main straight, so no one was going to be making a dive into turn 1. McLaren start breaking out plan letters. Oh, we're going to go plan B. I'm like, oh no. And I wrote in here, dare I say, tyre management lull inbound at lap 11. I was worried this was that classic one-stopper that I hate, where everyone now just tries to milk their tyres for as long as they can. And we're going to go into a lull and it's all going to be horrible.
Well, and I love Baku. I love the track. I love just the way the circuit winds through the city and the old town and the castle. And I love this race for a variety of reasons. The things that have happened. Charles, I think it was there when he went into, by the castle, went into the barriers.
I am stupid.
The team radio. This, as we said last week, this is where Grosjean said, Ericsson hit us. He wasn't even near him. Valtteri pipped Lance for second one race right at the line. I just love this race, but. The last couple of years have been boring. And we've, on this pod, recapped the fact that it hasn't lived up to what I wanted in particular. Both of us like it, but me, I'm a big Baku guy. So I was, when you wrote, dare I say tire management lull, I wrote, yes, you do, because I was starting to get nervous on my end. Like, oh, God, I feel like Charlie Brown. I'm going to go run up to kick the ball. Lucy's going to take it away, and it's going to be a boring Baku again. But at this point, we start seeing people box. At this point, we start seeing people come in, and Checo goes in, and Oscar almost gets undercut. So much so they left him out the next lap and then asked Lando to hold up Checo because, Lando, could you hold up Checo? We may have screwed up Oscar's strategy. Yeah, you did again. Box him faster. Box it. Why did it take them 2 laps to figure out what to do every time?
Really amazes me, and I know it will be way more complicated than this. When they cut to the pit lane and they show the guys watching it, they're kind of watching you see some TV screens that got the same feed on because they see themselves on TV and they smile and blah 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 blah. Which means everybody in the McLaren garage saw the graphic that said this lap, Oscar won't get undercut. Stay out one more lap, he'll get undercut. And then they went, let's keep him out. I don't believe that graphic. Let's keep him out. But Lando did a good job, slowed him down in the middle sector, and Oscar came out just ahead. Charles came in, and then you had kind of Albon out of position because he hadn't boxed yet because he started on the hards. And he actually, I don't think this is a sliding doors moment of the race, but Oscar was trying to get his tyres up to temperature, and Checo was hunting him down. Oscar latched onto the back of Albon and got his DRS. And I think that DRS toe didn't leave him a sitting duck for Checo to come and go past him. Now, it was still early in the race, so anything could have happened. But he kind of kept it there. Piastri got Albon, and he got him at a point where Checo didn't have enough time to make the move stick. So essentially then that gave Oscar a little bit of breathing room to kind of get his tyres up to to the right temperature. So, and which was critical because he needed to make these last.
They did. And he did. Interestingly, as you say, that he had to make them last. And so at this point, we start watching Oscar get closer and closer to Charles. And all of a sudden, it was like very quickly, he's in his DRS. And I was trying to figure out what happened. Did Charles have a moment? Like, I still don't know exactly how it went from a couple seconds to DRS instantly. Like, again, it was kind of shocking. But then what was amazing is how quickly Oscar got him, whether he brought the tires in slowly thanks to Albon, whether I think we saw just the Ferrari not performing as well on the hards as the McLaren did. Again, I've said this 100 times, the McLaren comes alive as the race goes on. It seems like the lower fuel, the car just does better than other cars relative when they get into that lower fuel area. And as we've always heard, the clean air really helps. So what ends up happening is on lap 20, this is an important lap to remember, Oscar takes Charles at turn 1. Relatively straight overtake, not crazy. It was a late breaker.
Quite far back. Yeah,
it was a late break,
wasn't it?
Yeah, even Charles said in the cooldown room, I didn't know if you were going to be able to make that stick, and Oscar joked 50-50 chance, and I was able to hold on there. But late breaker, but it was, no drama. Charles was to the right, yep. Oscar went into the left, late breaks takes him, and then what becomes epic is 27 laps of a three-way battle for first, sometimes two-way, sometimes three-way. Charles was in Oscar's DRS. Now, I know we got a lot more to talk about the race, but I was just shocked. For 27 laps, he was basically in DRS the whole time. And sometimes he would go for it at turn 1. Sometimes he was too far back. Do you remember, like, 2018, 2019, cars would get so hot. Like, they had, like, a 2-lap window where they could get up behind someone in battle, and then they'd have to back off to cool off. And the 2022 regs, or whatever it was, when they redid when they redid the regs, they said, we'll have better following because of this. The air won't be kicked straight behind. It'll be more up and out. And we've seen that with the spray on wet tracks. It's impossible to see. But by doing that, this was so good. This was such a good battle. And then Checo kept popping his nose in there and like, hey, don't forget about me. Like, hey, don't forget about me. And Red Bull that looked terrible in Max's hands, Checo somehow hung on to the back of Charles in second. Man, I loved it. From lap 20 to lap 47, it was just, how did they do that? How did Charles do that? And how did Oscar, I know I'm getting way ahead here, but how did Oscar drive perfectly with a car an inch behind him at 210 miles an hour for 27 laps?
Just epic. And it started getting really difficult to keep track of all the stories that were going on because, like, everybody seemed to be close everywhere. So we've got the front three up front covered by 1.4 seconds, and they basically stayed like that forever. They're still 1.4 seconds apart right now. And then, well, one of them isn't. But anyway, we'll get to that.
One of them got sized.
And then you've got Sainz finally got past Norris, and now he can go and see if he can go and join the party. You've got Behrman holding off Hamilton in a Haas, and Hamilton can't get past
forever. It
Behrman.
took him.
You've got what else have we got? We've got Norris still out trying to see how far he can extend, and everyone's trying to do the mental arithmetic. When he comes in and he goes to mediums, how far's behind Max is he going to be?
Will he ahead of Fernando or not? Can he catch Max?
Exactly. So you had that coming out. You had Albon staying out as well, which was kind of ruining Norris's race because they were both trying to stretch it, and he could not get past that quick Williams at all. And then further on back down, the battle for the lower end of the points, you'd got Haas boys and Williams boys going toe for toe with Colapinto going, I'm fancying some points today, guys. And at one point, I didn't write it down, somewhere in all of this, they actually constructed a sandwich properly where they actually taught we had, I think it was Haas, both Williams and a Haas. And they said, well, there we are. We've got the burger buns of the Haas boys with the meat in the sandwiches, the Williams. And I was like, yes, finally, you didn't name a sandwich after the bread.
I actually think Harry made that mistake at first. I couldn't hear because I was chewing my Cheetos so loudly. But then I will say this. When Karun deconstructed it into the actual components of the sandwich, they got it right at that point for sure. You nailed it, man. Like the top 12, the whole race was great. And, Alex, when he finally pitted and released Lando to keep some speed up and try to get ahead of Alonso's pit window, That was amazing. Alonso was in witness protection the whole race, and so was
Yes.
George for most of it too until the end. And we just didn't see them. Alonso finished sixth. That's amazing. I didn't even know he was running the race, except he just didn't want people pitting behind him, coming out of the pits behind him. But like you say, Haas and Williams, the only teams who really, quite honestly, were just kind of tootling at the back: Sauber, RB, Alpine. And those were the teams kind of chilling out at the back of the race. And like we occasionally saw Sauber towards the end when we saw some flashes of green as they passed him. I don't know if it was Valtteri or Joe did a good job getting out of the way. But yeah, this was awesome. And then, like you said, when Lando finally pitted and he comes out and he's on the mediums, and now you were getting really into this because I didn't even notice it at first. He's like 13 seconds behind Max. And the question becomes, can he get him? He did. And it was epic. I mean, Lando's out hunting people. Carlos got involved in the top four battle, became a top four battle for a while, with Oscar driving perfectly, Charles right behind him, Checo right behind him, and then Carlos is like, oh, hey, I fancy getting involved in this too. We had a four-way battle for the lead, effectively. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, so we're now about 10 laps to go if we kind of where we were, and we got Hamilton finally got past Behrman, and then we had the great slow-mo drift competition of Oscar
Oh,
and Charles coming around that
chef's
corner where it
kiss.
showed it's like Oscar, oh, he's at a moment, and his back end slides out, and then literally coming into shot behind is Charles going, hold my beer, I can do that as well.
Did you see in the cooldown room when they saw that? So they see Oscar come around sideways, and Charles and George are like, ooh. And then they see Charles come around sideways and they're like, whoa. It was so good. Even they loved it.
It was brilliant. And now you've got Science is now within like almost 2 seconds behind Checo, but we're also trying to keep an eye on like Norris has now nibbled it down to 8 seconds or something behind Max, and we're getting this striking distance graphics coming up all over the place. That graphic person was having a field day today because they were like, Science is in striking distance of Checo in 3 laps, and Norris is in striking distance of Max in 6 laps, and it's like everything's going off. And then all of a sudden, where are we? Lap 47.
Yep.
Charles's tyres
Died.
essentially went to tyre heaven.
They
were
did.
just
His rear
they were
tires
done.
were toast.
They checked out. If you looked really closely, you can see the sole of the tyres just float on up to tyre heaven, and all of a sudden. Oscar's now broken DRS, and then it's 1.7, then it's
Yep.
2, then it's 2.5, and it just goes. And now it's Charles just nursing, charging battery, trying to work out what he can do, trying to back up Perez into Sainz, because now Sainz is in Checo's DRS, and it's all going off.
It was going crazy. Like you say, I got it 27 laps. It was lap 20 when Oscar, and this is why I highlighted lap 20 before. It was lap 20 when Oscar took Charles. Charles was in DRS for 27 laps, maybe very rarely out of it, but basically under a second. I can't explain. When they showed the rear view of Oscar's car, you could almost taste the Ferrari red, like in the video right there in the screen. Like, oh my God, Charles is close, and it's a great reminder of how crazily talented these drivers are. That Charles was inches behind a car in front of him for 27 laps. Yeah. Inches.
And not just Charles being inches behind, but Oscar didn't put a foot or a wheel wrong on any of those approaches into turn one. Every time the commentary team went, Charles is closer now, this is the one, this is the attempt, Oscar moved over to the left. Yep. His one kind of allowed move, and then into the braking zone, he would let himself drift back out to the right a little bit to take the corner. And he never really, I don't think Charles ever really had a proper attack at him. There's maybe one where he maybe got his nose up amongst his business, but I think Oscar just drove that beautifully. He absolutely nailed it. For a kid that last year was being told he didn't have time management in his locker of skills that he's got.
Right. And this is probably the department of the obvious, but something I hadn't thought of. Oscar always defended to the left into turn one. He wanted the inside line. Like, he decided he was more comfortable having the inside line if Charles was next to him on the outside. He didn't want the reverse. So he never defended to the right, giving Charles the inside. Now, I know that probably, again, Captain Obvious, but I hadn't thought of that. Like, as I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, that's fascinating, because I'm fairly certain Oscar took Charles on the inside. If you remember, his late braking came inside of Charles. So Oscar says, you know what, I'm not going to let him do that to me. And he kept going to the left every time. And what would happen is sometimes Charles would get cut off towards the wall and be behind him. But sometimes Charles would actually take a wider angle and come around the left and try to get him on the inside into turn 2, but never had the speed. He never had the pace to quite get Oscar into turn 2. So, man, it was so good. But like you say, Oscar didn't make a mistake. For 27 laps, he had a Ferrari in his pocket, up his trumpet, as they would say on the Grand Tour. And he did not make it. It was shocking. And it was great defending by him, but also great attacking by Charles. You know, Lance Stroll should watch this. This was a masterclass in how to actually defend lines and attack people without, popping their side pods off.
Yeah. And just before we get to the big drama, then we had lap 48, Norris finally gets into Max's DRS, and it did not take him any time at all. There was almost a look of resignation. Max didn't even try and defend it.
Max
it wasn't even a DRS.
Was so annoyed in this car this weekend.
He just checked out at this point, hadn't he? It was kind of, there goes Lando. I mean...
Now, they didn't show this because of the chaos at the end. I think Max may have boxed for a pair of softs.
He did, yes.
Set of softs, yeah. And I think that's where he did a VSC infringement, which is being investigated as we record this right now. So,
okay.
We'll find out what that is and what actually happened. But anyway, just fascinating.
Yeah, I was waiting for the end of that sentence there, and you just sort of drifted off. But there we go. So,
well, my wife is sending me texts. We have a squirrel in the garage that won't go away, and it's yelling at her. So now I have to, when we hang up, I have to go deal with that.
Nice. Just leave the garage door open; it'll go. Then I'd written literally one lap before this. I was like, right, Perez, stick or twist. Pack Charles, who looks like he's struggling, or just keep Sainz at bay because he's all up your trumpet and is probably in a quicker car. So do you take the podium and just defend against Sainz, or do you take it to Charles? And they're racing drivers. They're not going to settle for things. No. He takes it to Charles. But then Charles kind of essentially hangs on by... I don't know what the tire equivalent are of fingernails, but hangs on by whatever that is to just about manage to keep Perez at bay, which then forces Perez to run wide, and Sainz comes flying through and said, I'll have a piece of this.
Right.
I honestly thought at this point, Ferrari were going to let Sainz go past because he was blatantly quicker and Charles was dead.
His tires were toast.
And he could maybe have used DRS to help Charles stay ahead, but no, those two fought, and Sainz had to back out of it. He comes round the corner. Now, at the beginning of this pod, your comment, you see the blame in Sainz on this one, do you?
I do. So, again, it was epic. I agree with... I just want to recap what you said, because this is 4 laps to the end of a Grand Prix. Oscar has just pulled away because, as you say, Charles' tires had gone to tire heaven. He'd done everything he could. And people may say, oh, Ferrari didn't do this, he didn't manage that. 27 laps in DRS. The fact that the tires were still on the rims is shocking at this point. He did a great job. I don't know how he managed to keep them alive for that long. So at no point is there any... This was just epic. He said he was disappointed to finish second. He's the luckiest second-place finisher in the history of F1 this season because he had no business being in front of anybody because his tires were done. And so, as you say, great defense on Checo. Of course Checo's going to take him. And great defense. And then as Checo kind of has to back out a little of the move, Carlos gets him. They are side by side. I went back because it was so close to the end. I could rewind quickly and watch it a couple times. As they come out of 2, Checo is alongside but behind, alongside Sainz. He does not move his wheel right whatsoever. He is going straight. Carlos is along the wall, and I don't think he knew Checo was there. And I think he jigs a little bit left, not much.
He follows Charles, doesn't he? Because if you watch Charles in front of him,
yes.
the racing line is to go over to the left,
correct,
ready for the next corner. And he seems to just autopilot follow him.
But he didn't even go that fast. Like, it wasn't like Charles moved over. He kind of just drifted a millimeter, and then their wheels touched.
A millimeter? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was like, I would say it was a racing incident because if he'd have jinked to the left, like properly and really gone aggressively for the racing line, you're an idiot. But I think you summed it up perfectly. Like a millimeter, just naturally the car just moves to the left to follow the racing line, and that 1 millimeter is enough. Wheels touch, boom, crash. Good night, Vienna. You're out.
I know,
both of you
but
in a
here's the
mess.
thing. Here's the thing. Like, I think Checo knew exactly where Carlos was, and he was pulling upside, along him, and he's like, I got, I can get him or hold my spot. I'm allowed this spot. When Carlos, with the radio we heard, he's like, what happened?
Yeah.
Because I don't think he knew Checo was there, and now,
I agree, because if he'd known he was there and he took a bit of a calculated risk and it fired, you're going to get one of those messages: "Is what's this
right,
idiot doing?" Blah 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 blah.
exactly.
He was completely. I I
Like,
think
what
Ericsson
happened?
hit
Like,
us.
yeah, exactly. I think Erickson hit us exactly. Yeah, we basically needed a stop inventing situation here.
Stop inventing. Stop inventing.
I honestly, I think so again, they ran the race later in the season than normal. It's usually in the first half. It's a different time of year. The sun was a problem for everybody all weekend. Like, everybody complained about it, and you couldn't even see who some of the cars were coming into turn one. You just saw basically the silhouette of the car. You couldn't tell the color or the driver. I'm guessing after the chaos, I don't think Carlos knew Checo was there. I think the sun and everything, the changing of positions, I think it's on Carlos. I don't think he knew it was there. He drifted a little bit left. It wasn't big, but again, I would actually chalk it up to a racing incident. But if you had to assign blame, I'm giving
Because
all
I
of
think
it.
Checo had enough time to react. If he even saw him coming over a little bit,
Agreed.
Checo's got the ability to go left as well. So yeah, that's why I kind of thought racing incident. I don't know, as far as when we've come down to record, I haven't seen that it was being investigated or
It
anything had been
is.
dished out in terms of
There
the
were two
penalty. I meant,
VSC
sorry.
infringements in that are being investigated at the end of
Right.
the race.
Okay.
The other one was when Hulk got some damage to his car. I think they're investigating Behrman because he passed him under the VSC, but Hulk had a problem with his car. That's my
Right.
understanding. Again, we're recording this fast, but man, that was a great race. That was wild. And then all of a sudden, it's carbon fiber city, and it's just a hail of carbon fiber. And George goes rolling through. I'm like, why didn't they put a flag or a red flag, or maybe not to red flag it, but a safety car out faster? Why was it yellow for so long?
It did seem to take a while before they decided what they were going to do with it. But George Russell, which race did he win when he was
Austria.
Austria, when he just inherited the win?
Max and
Right.
Lando took each other
Um,
out, and George is like,
right.
I'll have this, thanks. He just got a free podium.
He just got a free podium there. He's there almost in witness protection. He'd been involved in the DRS train with Max and everybody else, but once that had cleared, he was basically all by himself, just minding his own business. He must have come around that corner and seen those two cars in the barrier and just like obviously, I hope they're okay. Is the first
course,
reaction.
yeah, yeah.
Second reaction,
Yeah,
just
George
knocked
is
my
a
way
good
onto
guy.
the podium.
He definitely probably wanted to make sure they're fine, and then basically said, "Oh yeah, baby, George Russell in third." I don't think anybody saw that coming. That was wild. It also promoted so many other people, right? And so part of the thing we need to talk about are some of the lower spots on the grid who finished. Lando did finish fourth from qualifying 17th. Unbelievable recovery.
Amazing.
I know,
And he grabbed the fastest lap as well.
correct, and he finished ahead of Max. So while catching him became harder because he only finished a point or two ahead of Max on the weekend, at least he didn't finish behind Max. Max
exactly.
was a miserable, as Karun kept saying. He's not a happy bunny. I don't know what that means. I don't understand British slang. Is everyone a bunny? And if you're happy, you're a bunny, and if you're unhappy, you're an unhappy bunny. I mean, like, enough with the bunny.
No. Yeah, I don't know where it comes from, but yeah, if you're not happy, you're not a happy bunny. But
But
if you are happy,
Williams,
no one ever calls you a happy bunny, really. Well, maybe they do.
I don't
Anyway,
know. Williams
yeah,
seventh and eighth.
seventh and eighth. Look at that, Colapinto in there. And then
Amazing.
Hamilton and Behrman. So Hamilton, I mean, didn't have a great race weekend, but he's managed to bring home some points when at one point it looked like he was just going to sit outside the points for the rest of the race.
And I have
what do
one stat on Behrman that I have to use. And since we're doing this so fast, I didn't have time to create stats. So this is the single soul Sapstat. And I'm using the Mariachi Sapstat Baku edition, singular. I used the Mariachi because Checo drove a great race. He did not deserve this. I want to talk about Checo a little bit more here in a second. Anyway, Ollie Behrman becomes the first driver ever to score points for two different teams in his first two Grand Prix starts, because obviously he famously finished seventh at Saudi Arabia in the Ferrari when Carlos decided to lose some weight and get his appendix out, become more aerodynamic, and then create the Williams team for next season of no appendix boys. But then, yeah, so he finished 10th. Great job by Behrman. Two rookies in the points. Colapinto, Behrman, both in the points. That's awesome for Williams and Haas.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing for those guys. They needed that crash, didn't they? Because Behrman finished 10th, so he would have been 12th. He would have been squeezed out. Colapinto was in the points regardless. He would have been 10th without that. So that's just a phenomenal drive. So we got to get to the bit which is just going to be really, really hard. I think because there's multiple contenders, but we need to do our King of the Pits in the pits, don't we?
We
Or are we
do.
gonna listen? Are we gonna listen to Paul first?
What would you like?
Oh, oof. Let's hear Paul, and then we'll do our King of the Pits.
Perfect. So let's introduce Paul now with Mr. Pitside.
Hey now. Well, listen, I like a good happy birthday. I think we all do. So I believe it was Rob's. Another year closer to the old coffin, my friend. So many happy returns for that. Let me set the scene. I've just had buttered chicken. It's a staple. It's a staple dish from the Valtteri Bottas team. I won't lie. We all love a bit of buttered chicken. So we're back at the hotel. Now, if you watched the race, probably a bit dumb since I'm actually doing a review on this podcast. I know you watched the race. You're those strange people who watch practice sessions. But I stay in the Hilton Hotel, which is one end of the paddock, and then we have the JW Marriott the other. So as I look out of my hotel room window right now, everyone is packing up. And look, pack-ups. How can I word this? It's like going to watch a football game and then you've been absolutely, smashed apart, and then you've got like a 2-hour drive home and it's raining. There's a bit of wind and there's obviously traffic. So it's the worst thing in the world is pack up. You just want to go home and you can't. You've got to stay and do that. Luckily, I don't have to do that anymore. That's it, really. If I'm being honest, that's the only positive of my day. But let's go back to the race. Now, look, I am going to be brutally honest. After 5-10 laps of the race, I switched off. I went and started packing up our driver room. We were down the bottom, not doing a great deal. And the race just seemed to be boring. It was just like Piastri following the clerk. And then, I don't know. Then there was no, I know we joke about yellow flags and stuff. I don't want to see a driver have an accident. I don't want to see a driver break down. But apart from, Lance Stroll's crazy move on Yuki. I would call it a crazy move because, I don't know. I guess I've just jumped ahead and missed practice sessions, by the way. But you know me in practice, nothing happens. Qualifying, pretty standard, apart from Lando. But I think, again, we'll touch that in a minute. And then the race just sort of carried on, and I was just a bit like... I know I spoke before, about when I get frustrated, and sometimes I might come across as slightly moody, slightly, slightly moody. It's actually the best way of wording it. And I'm genuinely not. It's just you care, and so I went and just sort of kind of sulk upstairs, and I put the commentary on the iPad, so I sort of knew what was going on. And that was, and I thought, okay. Went downstairs, and it's a long race. It's just boring. It's it felt like the first 20 laps lasted forever and I just weren't interested. So I went downstairs, I looked at the TV and I was like, oh great, yeah, Leclerc's still winning, Oscar's still second. And then, Perez, and credit to Perez, you guys bully him religiously on this show. I'm quite supportive of the guy, clearly. But yeah, it was like, whatever. But everyone's sort of waiting. The pit strategy was terrible for every team, and it was just like, let's do a one-stop, start on mediums, track's green, just crap. Sorry, guys, crap. And I was like, how am I going to muster up the enthusiasm needed to make the Satman happy with a review today? Well, I'm not that religious, but if there was a God, he sort of peered his lovely head out of the clouds and had a little look down on us, because all of a sudden we had a race on. And I won't lie to you, it was probably there all along. You guys are probably, high-fiving and whooping each other about how great the race was. I'm probably you're probably now listening thinking, what's this guy rabbiting on about? But yeah, then all of a sudden, bang, there seemed to be this race going on. And there were 4 cars sort of involved, and I don't know. I sort of sat there a little bit confused, looking at the TV for a bit, thinking, well, where did this come from? Because you had the pit stops, and Lando did a great job. I think it was holding Perez up. Look, I'm a 2021 enthusiast, so I'm not going to, Perez has got to take his own pill sometime, It's what he did to Lewis. It's what you have to do. It's a team thing. I know you guys know who's won, you've discussed it, but it did give Oscar the win, so that's life, chin up. But then, for me, the next sort of the last third of the race, it was like, it was, let's face it, it was bloody brilliant. B, if you're like me, I was sort of sat there, and I think you're gathering that by this so far. I was sort of like, how has this happened? So we ended up with these cars all sort of like racing towards the end of the race, close together. The top four, Leclerc was snapping at Piastri's tail a little bit with and Oscar's move on Leclerc earlier. There was a load. I'm probably in the wrong here. I won't lie, guys. And then it was just brilliant. And Leclerc trying to overtake Oscar and not being able to quite get close enough. It must have been so frustrating because he was so close. And I don't know if you guys have discussed engine modes and how in batteries and how all this sort of works around with that kind of thing. I'll be happy to sort of I'd be happy to tell you. I'll be happy to think I can tell you how all that works, but. Yeah, so basically Oscar can store up enough energy to give himself a boost on the start-finish rate to protect himself from Leclerc. And wow! And then obviously with those two holding each other up, and then they came behind these two green cars. I don't want to talk about them, but they started to get to the point where they're going to lap these two green cars. And they were right to Sergio Perez, saying, look, this is going to get quite messy. I don't think they expected what happened with Perez and Carlos, but... yeah, then you had Carlos and Perez join this race, and I mean, I'm sure you guys... Look, the instant between them two, I first, when it happened, I was sort of like, oh, Carlos, what are you doing? For me, Carlos 100% was guilty. I mean, I was literally like, you are joking me, Carlos, what have you done? But actually, when you look back and you look at it again, you quickly realise it was... For me, I hope... And by the time that you guys might record, there might be a penalty. I don't know. But there should be no penalty. That's just one of those things. Valtteri, who was the next car on scene, said it looked pretty spectacular. But it was sort of like... It was bizarrely a really fitting end for a great race. Not that I enjoyed watching it finish under a VSC. But it made it great. Anyway, I've been on for 7 minutes, so I need to cut this short. I think the moral of the story is, look, a race can be absolutely dog awful, but it can come alive. And I think you've just got to have patience sometime. And I have learned a terribly good lesson on that tonight. What I will say, I have just finished watching the English Premier League, and I have got to just make comment on Arsenal beating Tottenham. I'm excited. Rob's going to be excited. Boom, get in there. Let's go to Singapore. 7 minutes 48 of me absolutely waffling. Good day to you all.
Well, thanks, Paul. We both have no idea what you just said because we're recording so early you haven't sent it in yet. But I will have edited it in by now, and whatever you just said will have been absolutely amazing.
Great recap, Paul. Thank you so much.
So, right, okay, the awards times. I think this is such a good race. We need to finish on a high. So let's get the let's do reverse order for once. Let's do the pits first and get the points.
You're the pits. All right, I'll go first on the pits.
Okay.
It feels. First of all, can I just say it feels so good not to give this to Checo. I mean, this feels so good. As the guy who's cheered for Checo for so long, and we got into a thing on the Discord about Bahrain, the short from 2020, and how Checo won that race, his first race, 190 races for him to get there, longest streak ever, and how he was crying on the podium, and I was talking how much it meant, and I don't have to give Checo the pits this week. So I'm going to give it to Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll is out there complaining in practice that it's not even a car. His dad just signed him Adrian Newey officially, and he goes out there, and Baku is a very tough track. We usually see red flags or safety cars. We saw nothing until the very end. And everybody knows the risk. The walls are tight, but it's fast. It's faster than Monaco by a huge factor. And you just can't screw up. And you definitely can't screw up and get in other people's ways. And Lance did both. He made a dumb move on the first lap and took out another driver. So for me, given all that, I'm giving it to Lance F. Stroll Incorporated.
Yeah, I concur. There's no point me even doing any kind of big description as to why, because you just summed it all up. He not only basically ruined his own race, poor old Yuki took out as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right.
Okay. Now the sort of obvious but difficult one. But
I was
let's go
starting
for
the music.
pits.
I thought we were
I
ready.
know
King
you
of
were.
the
I know.
pits.
Let's
Here we
go. King of the pits.
You're the king of the pit.
All right. Since I went first on the pits, I'm going to go first here too, and you can go first next week. I'm not good at doing things the way they're supposed to be done, right? I can't just give one person the king, even though it's a one-person award.
Well, no, you have to.
Yes, so I'm giving it to Oscar because
Okay.
it was the drive of the year, in my opinion. We've seen other good drives, George extending his tires when he didn't have enough weight, but what he did at Silverstone, and then we saw was it Silverstone? Now I can't remember where. I think it was. And then we saw, amazing drives by Charles and Monza. We've seen people really do some amazing stuff this season. That drive from a second-year driver, I don't care, he could be as old as Fernando. That was a perfect drive. And so I'm giving it to Oscar. However, just so everyone knows, there was a little bit in my mind that said Checo was in the consideration because that car stinks. He's fighting for his career, and he was third and for the whole race, and he also drove brilliantly. And again, I put none of it on him for being out of that race, and I just feel bad. And he drove the wheels off that thing. So anyway, still Oscar, but I saw you check.
Yeah, I was kind of like, it's got to be Oscar because of what you just said, but it's got to be Charles because of the defense he did once his tires had gone to heaven. But it's got to be Checo because of how he took that lug nuts and almost got the podium before the crash. But it's got to be Norris because he drove back from 17th to 4th. But it's got to be Colapinto because he got points.
Right. But it's got to be Behrman.
Maybe Behrman as well, but I would have said Colapinto over Behrman for where he finished. So I'm going down this thing of so many contenders. However, for everything you just said, it has to be Oscar, right? It just has to be. But there's so many honourable mentions of people that are kind of almost got the King of the Pits crown on this week. I should be able to just give it to the Baku Grand Prix.
It delivered for the first time in a few years, and I'll ride high on this and think Baku's the best track, giving us the best races for the entire next calendar year until we get to it again. But we both gave it to Oscar, and even though Lando was also deserving of this consideration, and Colapinto and everyone, you said Charles and Checo, McLaren's now first in the constructors with 476 points, 20 points clear of Red Bull, and Ferrari is now sniffing around Red Bull. They're only 31 points back. So there's a very real chance. At the break, we were all like, can McLaren get Red Bull? And we're all like, probably, but we're not sure. Now the question is, will Red Bull even finish second in the constructor, or will Ferrari get them and finish second? That's going to be fascinating.
I was going to say, it's a nice little segue to the preview of what comes next, which is up next is Singapore, which Red Bull have not done well at the last couple of years, and Ferrari have. So, yeah, we go back to back. We go to Singapore Grand Prix at Marina Bay. 63 laps of a 3.062 mile circuit at night. This is the one that gets lit up. Kind of looking back, Alonso won the inaugural edition of the renewed Grand Prix, driving for Renault. But there might have been some kind of small little issues with that win after Mr. Nelson Piquet Jr. may have, accidentally crashed. It was Crashgate. It was the Crashgate track. So,
do you think now with Briatore back, Flavio Briatore, who was part of that team, now that he's back at Alpine, you think there's a chance he tells Ocon, who's leaving the team, just to take one and let Pierre finish higher up somehow?
I mean, that Alpine finish higher up. Finish 16th rather than 17th?
Maybe he could.
I mean,
a technical failure and his fuel flow goes a little faster again. Who knows? The gas man's getting too much gas.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, There's a good chance of a crash. Since its inception, it has been known for featuring at least one safety car in every single race edition, with a total of 23 safety car deployments. But this was as of 2022, and I didn't check back when I pulled the stats together to remember if we had a safety car last
Well,
year.
George
Um,
screwed it up at the end. You remember he was third and he thought he had a shot at it, and he nicked the wall in the last lap or two, and that was where I really felt like we started watching George push too hard at times. And overdrive his car, and he binned it bad. And he was fine, thankfully, that we can joke about it at this point. But yeah, it was a good race. It was fun, as you say. Carlos won, and yes, last year there was a situation at the end. I will say this for anyone newer to F1, you got to watch how taxing this race is. It is so hot and so humid, even though it's at night. Every single driver usually points to Singapore as the hardest race on the calendar.
Yeah.
At least one of the. And so it is fascinating. Lewis has always talked about how much weight he loses during the race. It is a tough, tough race. And I enjoy watching it, but I'm super excited for it. But like you say, red flags. Always watch for a red flag or a safety car at least to have an impact on this race.
Yep, and like you said, Sainz won. He converted from pole, which is something you might want to have a word to Charles about as to how you do that.
Ouch.
And it was a highlight, wasn't it? Because Max had won everything last year, and suddenly we had Max not winning because the Red Bull didn't go well around here. And this one was famous for Sainz doing the keeping Norris in his DRS at the end to tow him along because the Mercedes were catching at a massive rate of knots. So he just used Norris as a kind of rear guard action and did it perfectly. I mean, sometimes he gave Norris a little bit too much of a boost and it looked like Norris might get Sainz, but then I think Norris was like, well, if I go past him, I'm going to be in the same issue. So they just kind of almost like silently worked together.
It was Carlando again. Carlando back together, again. Just not in the same team.
So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how this is going to go this year because, Red Bull, okay, so Checo made it look a bit better this year, but maybe historically this is a track where the Red Bull has always gone super well. So maybe actually struggling to try and get on the podium is a step backwards. It looked like it was with Max. So if they don't get their act together and take those bits off and unpush the upgrade button, they might struggle again. And then you're going to say, well, there's this now Ferrari have played nicely here the last couple of years. They look really good. So is it now Ferrari and McLaren we're going to be talking about? But Mercedes were on the hunt last year. So it's just so fascinating to go into race weekends not having a clue what's going to happen. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I do too. I totally do. And I am really looking forward to this race. But like you say, it is important. It does have different characteristics than a lot of other races, right? It's fast, but also slow. There's a lot of 90-degree turns, kind of like Baku, actually, in that regard. But it's not quite as high speed as Baku, so it's a fascinating run. It's hot, 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 and humid. And as you say, last year, Max dominated everything, but then showed up to Singapore and was like sixth. So it just, what that means is, and I'm not just saying for Red Bull, but for every constructor, your car may perform differently than you expect. And so I'm kind of curious. McLaren has looked good everywhere recently. Will they look good in Singapore? I don't know. Ferrari obviously did well last year, but they're in a different characteristic of this car versus last year. They're better on their tires than last year. Will that translate to Singapore? Don't know. I can't wait. This is great. I don't know who's going to win next week.
I know. And no one's going to go to the top of the leaderboard here, regardless of who wins, because repeat winners up at the top with 5 is one Sebastian Vettel. Hamilton's got 4. He could join him, but no one's going to go clear this week. And then we've got Alonso at 2. Constructors, it's a 3-way tie of Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari with 4. McLaren and Renault lurking back on 1. So, fascinating to see who's going to add to those little statoids.
I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. Rob, anything else you want to say before we sign off for the week?
No, I need to go and calm down and get my stuff together and head to the airport, really. But still brimming on the fact that this was an absolutely epic Baku that I was kind of not expecting. Because I'd looked back at those 2 previous reviews that we've done on this pod. We were starting to think we were the curse because the only 2 times that we've ever reviewed it, it's been a stinker. And now it was epic. So awesome.
Awesome. For sure. I echo that. And we really appreciate you all listening. It's great to be on the dirty side with everybody. And we can't wait to watch Singapore in 1 week's time and be back with that review, plus the fantasy recap. Paul, thanks for the review. Everyone have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you in 1 week's time.